Hi, this is Mike Hoffner with McKonly Asbury. I'm the partner in charge of our service organization controls practice, and over the last 12 to 18 months we've received a significant number of inquiries into new SOC reports, and it's highlighted the need for further education in this area. So thanks for joining us for a few minutes. Our purpose today is not to go into significant detail, but just to do a high-level 30,000-foot overview of who gets SOC reports, why they're asked for, and what the various types of SOC reports mean. It's helpful to start with a little bit of history on the SOC reports. If you go back to 1992, service organizations were given the option of performing a SAS 70 report. That's a very familiar name to a lot of us. And the SAS 70 report was really geared towards helping service organizations provide an opinion on the effectiveness of their internal controls to those customers and users that use the services they provided. Over the course of a number of years, the purpose of the SAS 70 stayed the same, but the service organizations changed. We had things like data centers and software as a service providers. We had infrastructure management, things that really didn't get covered by the SAS 70 approach, but were significant service providers to user customers. To address some of these changes that were necessary and make sure those service organizations could report to their user customers, SSAE 16 was released in 2010. The purpose of SSAE 16 was to make sure we had a clear understanding of how service organizations that do traditional transaction processing could report to their users, but also to address the needs of the information technology-based service organizations. This introduced the idea to us of SOC 1, SOC 2, and SOC 3 reports, which is really the purpose of the next few minutes. We'll talk about what those are, what they mean, and who gets them. First, let's cover the basics. Who gets an SOC report? SOC reports are geared towards service organizations. That's defined as an entity that provides services to customers that are important to that customer's control systems. So you can provide services that affect financial reporting, like transaction processing, or you can be a data center that provides all the back office data processing for that organization. So service organization is exactly what it sounds like. It's an entity that provides services to others, and the SOC report, again, is really meant to speak towards the internal controls at that user organization and how that affects their customers. So by providing that SOC report to their customers, the customer is assured that the organization has good controls in place over the things that are important to them, and therefore they can provide that report to their auditor and their management and their stakeholders to ensure that they do have a good, adequate understanding of all the internal controls, not only within the organization, but at those service providers they rely on to conduct their business. So to talk a little bit about SOC 1 reports specifically, let me introduce my colleague Josh Bantz. Josh is a great part of our practice here at McKonly Asbury and has a lot of experience in both SOC 1 and 2, and I'll take just a few minutes to talk through who gets a SOC 1 report and what specifically that means.
Hi, I'm Josh Bantz, a Senior Manager at McKonly Asbury in the Service Organization Controls practice. SOC 1 examinations focus on controls at service organizations that are relevant to internal controls over financial reporting at the user organizations. A perfect example of this would be a payroll processor who processes payroll and then provides reports to user organizations for them to record the financial transactions. Some key components to a SOC 1 report: service organizations get the opportunity to select and scope their control objectives and controls at a service for the Service Organization Controls 1 report. The service organization management will actually perform a risk assessment which goes over the risks associated with the controls that they perform and determine the appropriate control objectives and controls relevant to those services. SOC 1 reports have several key components. One is the auditor's report, which includes an opinion on the internal controls. In addition to that, there's a description of controls narrative, which details all aspects of the service organization's controls. In addition, there's also a section of the report that includes the controls as well as the control objectives and the tests of the controls. One of the last components of the report is a user control consideration section, which details how the service organization determined the appropriate scope for the controls based upon the user control considerations at the user entities, such as logical access controls, things like that that would impact aspects of the controls of the service organization. In addition to the control objectives and controls within the report, there's also a section on user entity control considerations, which are the controls that must be in place at the user entity for the controls at the service organization to work appropriately. There are two types of SOC 1 examination. The Type 1 examination is an examination on the design effectiveness of the controls at a service organization. The primary focus of this is on walkthroughs and inquiry to determine whether the controls are designed effectively to meet the appropriate control objectives. We rarely get the opportunity to do these as they provide very, very limited assurance to the service organization.
So where SOC 1 reports are really focused on service organizations that provide services directly impacting financial reporting, SOC 2 examinations are focused on those organizations that provide other administrative services or support services like data hosting, software as a service providers, things that are more operational in nature than directly impacting financial reporting. So there's some significant differences in the SOC reporting, the nature of the report, but most importantly, the control objectives and the things that need addressed in the report. So where in a SOC 1, the service organization identifies those objectives most relevant to its users and reports on the controls that manage those objectives, a SOC 2 report has to be geared towards the AICPA's trust services principles, which are security, availability, processing integrity, confidentiality, and privacy. Now, a SOC 2 doesn't have to address all 5 of those. It can address anywhere from 1 to 5, but it's not something that the user organization or the service organization can define, this is the objectives I want to meet. It must be one of those 5 areas, and it must cover the criteria that are addressed in each of those 5 areas. Going into detail on what those are and what those mean is well beyond the scope of what we can get through today, but certainly worth a conversation if you're a service organization that provides that operational type of data hosting or backup. So reach out to us if you have questions on that, and we'll get into that in more detail on a one-to-one basis. So the nature of a SOC 2 report, and if you look at a SOC 1 versus a SOC 2 report, you'll see that the structure is very similar. So you have the service auditor's opinion, where McKonly Asbury provides our opinion on the effectiveness of all the controls if it's a Type 2. Then you'll have management's narrative that walks through all the processes surrounding the service organization. And then ultimately will be that similar section to Josh talked about, where we talk about control objectives and how they're managed. There's a lengthy section on the trust services principles and how those criteria are managed and what controls are in place and what the findings were of our testing. No different than a SOC 1, you can also have a Type 1 and a Type 2 report, and important to just reiterate that there are 5 trust service principles. The service organization identifies which 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 are most relevant to their customers and only focuses on the ones they've selected.
The Type 2 examination includes additional assurance and includes tests of controls to ensure that they are working and operating effectively. The Type 2 examination is generally over a period of time, with a period not less than 6 months and up to a year to 18 months. We generally do the majority of our work during Type 2 examinations as they provide the appropriate assurance on the not only design but also the operating effectiveness of the controls. SOC 3 examinations are very similar to SOC 2 in that they are examination on the design and operating effectiveness of controls relevant to the trust services principles. The primary difference between a SOC 2 and a SOC 3 is that a SOC 3 report includes only an auditor's opinion as well as a very, very limited narrative of the controls and a design of the system. In addition, the SOC 3 report is a general use report, which allows it to be widely distributed to potential clients as well as to be posted to the service organization's website if needed.
We recognize this was an extremely high-level review of SOC reporting and the differences in SOC 1, SOC 2, SOC 3. We talked about Type 1 and Type 2. We talked about service providers that provide financial reporting and data warehousing, and very, very high level. And so we invite you to reach out to us, and please, if you have further questions, if you represent a service organization or if you represent a user organization and wonders what you're getting in a service organization controls report, please reach out. Josh or I will be more than happy to talk through your needs and give you some clarity on what you're looking at. Thanks. Have a wonderful day.